Hello everyone. In this topic, we will discuss about Azure Data Box. Azure Data Box is a physical migration box. Microsoft will ship the box. This is an hardware box. This is one type of data box. There are multiple types of data box. This is called as Azure Data Box. There is another type of data box which is called as Azure Data Box Disk. Azure Data Box AB, Azure Data Box Gateway. So these three are used for offline migration. If you have data, it is very difficult to move this data to the cloud. So if you have so much of data which is more than 40 TB or even 20 TB of data, it is very difficult to move with the network. So the network from where you are transferring to the Azure, so this network bandwidth will not be sufficient so that you can move all your data from your on-prem to the Azure cloud. So this is the Azure cloud. You wanted to move all your data to the Azure cloud. Since the data is very large at on-prem, you either choose the Azure Data Box, Azure Data Box Disks, Azure Data Box AV, or Data Box Gateway. This is online transfer of your data. So you need to set up a virtual appliance to move your data from your on-prem to Azure. So all these three options, 1, 2, and 3, these are all for offline migration. You copy the data onto your data box disk or data box AV, then ship the copied data to the Azure cloud. So whenever you are ordering the data box, you choose the region. So if your source region is US East, you need to select the region as US East while ordering the data box. So that if your on-prem location is in US East, Azure will be able to ship the data box, and from your on-prem location, this is your on-prem location, you'll be able to move the data back to the Azure cloud. If you have selected region as Singapore and you are asking to ship the data box to US East, then this will be a difficult task. So you need to choose the region properly. So how do you order the data box? You need to use the import and export tool, which is in the Azure portal. You order the data box will be sent to the on-prem location. This data box will have RJ45 connection and it will support up to 80 terabytes of data which can be copied to the data box itself. If you are using Azure Data Box disks, then this is going to support 40 TB of data. Azure Data Box AV is like a container which will be sent to your on-prem location, and this is a container. This is exactly like a container for moving 1 petabyte of data. So if you have more than 1 petabyte of data, you can move using Azure Data Box AV. If you wanted to use online transfer facility, then you can go with the Azure Data Box Gateway. So you need to install the appliance on your on-prem, and you need to have a connectivity from your on-prem to the cloud so that the Azure Gateway will be able to transfer the data from your on-prem to the Azure cloud. Azure Data Box can be used for both transferring data in and out of the cloud. So I can use Azure Data Box to transfer to the cloud, or out of the cloud, I can use the data box. So when you have connected this data box to your local network, so there is an RJ45 port, which is nothing but the Ethernet port. You connect the RJ45 with the UTP or STP cable. There will be a GUI portal which can be accessed to move the data from your on-prem location to the data box. So you have the GUI portal which you can access, and from your on-prem up to 80 terabytes of data, you can move to the data box and ship to Azure. The data, whatever you are copied onto the Azure data box, it will be imported onto the Azure cloud. So this is called as import and export. So when you are using the data box to move your data to the Azure cloud, then it will be import option. When you wanted to move out of the Azure cloud, then it will be export action. So let us see what are the use cases for using the data box. Data box is ideally suited to transfer larger than 40 terabytes of data. So for 40 terabytes of data, we can use Azure Data Box disks to transfer. It comes in 5 disk package. So it has a bundle of 5 disks, and we use the 5 disks of 40 terabytes of disks. We use BitLocker to encrypt, copy the data from on-prem, which is equal to or less than 40 terabyte, then move to the Azure cloud. So these are the scenarios when we are going to use the Azure Data Box. One-time migration when we wanted to move the entire data center data to the Azure cloud, and moving a media library from offline tapes. So if you have a tape backup and if you wanted to move the offline tapes to the Azure cloud, we can use that. Migrating our virtual machine farm or SQL server and application server to Azure. And if we have large set of data sets which we wanted to analyze using the Azure cloud, using HD Insight, or if we wanted to use some other tools like machine learning tools or artificial intelligence tools, we can use the data box to move the data. Initial bulk transfer. If I have the data which I wanted to move to the cloud, if I have decided that this is the data which I wanted to move to the cloud, then I will do initial bulk transfer. So I'll move the bulk data to the cloud using the data box. After that, the data I will use incremental transfer to Azure cloud. So once the big chunk of data, which is more than 40 terabytes of data, if 40 terabytes of data is there in on-prem and you wanted to move to the cloud, I will use the data box for initial bulk transfer. Then I will use network to transfer the incremental data. Scenarios where data box can be used to export. So exporting the data is moving the data from cloud to on-prem. So I have the data in Azure cloud and I wanted to move to the on-prem. If I have a DR site on on-prem, I can copy the data from the Azure cloud using the export. So there is a tool which I said import and export. We use export the data from Azure cloud and move the data to on-prem, keeping the data in the cloud, one of the copy, and moving the other copy to the on-prem so that we can set up DR site in the on-prem location. And also, this is also very important. If you have any security requirements and there is any government regulation to keep your data onto on-prem location, you can export the data from Azure cloud and keep the data or store the data in your on-prem location. Migrate back to on-prem or other cloud service provider. If you have decided not to use the cloud anymore, so I am using Azure cloud. I have decided not to use the Azure cloud. If I wanted to move to any other cloud service, so any other cloud service provider, or I wanted to move the data back to on-prem. So if I have decided not to use the Azure cloud, I wanted to migrate all the data from Azure, or I wanted to migrate the data back to other cloud service provider, I can use export service to move the data to my on-prem location to other cloud service provider, right? If you have used import facility and you have moved your on-prem data. This is your on-prem data, and you have used the data box. This is the data box which you have shipped to the Azure cloud. Once the data has been copied, the data which was there in the data box which you have copied, it will be wiped as per this standard, and there will be no data anymore in the data box. And the same data box will be given to other customer if they have requested using the import export migrate tool. So this was an overview of Azure Data Box. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the content, please subscribe and share the video. Thank you and take care.